And who better than Scott Connor? Oh my God. Destination Devy, one of the best dynasty minds in the business, here with me today to bring the show back with a flourish. Scott, what's happening?
Man, it's been too long since we've talked. I think it was maybe over a year ago that I was on here last, but you guys have been crushing it. Got tons of great content creators on here. This channel has exploded since the last time I was on, so hopefully there's some even newer eyes on our discussion because I think we're in for this. Let me just say this, Matt. This is probably the most fun time of the Dynasty year because nobody knows anything. Everything is hypothetical. Everything is, I think this is going to happen in free agency and in the draft, and I think this is what teams are going to do, even though we haven't seen shit from a lot of the coaches. So I just think this is the time where if you truly have some conviction, which that's probably been one of the things that I have lacked in my Dynasty career, I think if you have some conviction, you're going to get some bets that have better odds today than those same bets are going to have here in 3 to 6 months. Let me just say that.
How good is T. Higgins?
I'll tell you what, I think he's really good, but I hope that the rest of the league thinks he's good enough. Matt, do you think that a team will still be willing to make him an offer, even though he was probably a guy that was going to hit free agency and get 30 to 35 million a year? Do you think even on the tag, a team will have the balls to make him an offer?
God, I hope so. I want to see it, man. I want to see it. I mean,
Patriots make him an offer. They got to give up their 4th pick and their next year's first if they make him an offer on the tag. So that's what I'm pushing for. Because I'll tell you, Matt, I am absolutely sick at how many dumb people out there in the fantasy space do not understand the idea of the non-exclusive franchise tag. And for months, all I've been seeing is T. Higgins photoshopped in other jerseys. Well, let's see. Let's see if their team really has the conviction. Now, not the Patriots, right? Not the Jaguars. Those teams would have to give up a top 10 pick plus a 26 first. What about Washington, though? Could the Commanders give up the 29th pick and their 26 first to sign T. Higgins? Could that put them over the top? Like, that's a reasonable offer, which even though it's too late firsts, the Bengals would have to accept that, right? Getting 2 firsts on a cost-controlled basis for a guy that you'd have to turn around and pay. Because if the Bengals don't match the offer, they get the picks. But if they turn down the picks, they'd have to match the offer that another team would offer them. So I think, what do you think? Do you think a team picking in the back 4 of the draft would be, is that too much to pay? Like Washington paying pick 29 in their next year's first for T. Higgins? Is that crazy?
Well, is it too much to pay? Yes. If you're trying to build a sustainable championship team, no, you're not doing that. I don't even think if you're trying to microwave a championship, that's the way to go either. I think you're better off keeping those picks, even if you're microwaving. So I would never co-sign on that move from an NFL GM. However, I am sick and tired of so many of these NFL teams going by the book and being super conservative. Because it was a lot easier as a content creator, as someone who liked to talk football, when teams were doing crazy stuff. It was way easier. Like I remember where I was. I remember where I was driving when this Carolina Panthers trade for the 101 came down and DJ Moore's headed to Chicago. It feels like a lifetime ago that I was on the Tappan Zee Bridge on a Twitter X Spaces with Anand and Dury and Cody Carpentier and Billy Muzio, and everyone was just rushing to this Twitter Spaces. Marcus Mosier, shout out to Marcus, sharing player profiler screens on Twitter X and showcasing some players he likes. That was a great moment for us, and it seems like ever since that trade, like that was lifetimes ago, and for whatever reason, that was like the final straw. That was like the final move by a GM that was just selling out and completely overpaying for some draft pick or something. It's been by the book in the NFL ever since, and it's annoying.
Yeah, the other one that at the time I thought was crazy, but remember when the Texans traded back into the first for Will Anderson?
Yeah.
And you were
I
like,
didn't
what are they
agree with
doing?
that.
They're a terrible franchise. They've picked in the top 5 for how many years in a row? And then, well, since after Watson left, they were still, at the bottom. Everyone just assumed that was going to be the 101 next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, it's a playoff pick, and it looks like it was one of the better trades that we've seen. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I think with Higgins, like the bottom line is he's going to be a Bengal. I think they're going to do everything they can to work out a deal with him. My fear as a Bengals fan is if they don't work out a deal with him, the team is too stupid to actually understand they can trade him for less than that 2 first compensation. And I'll just say this, if we're into July and he doesn't have a contract, there's no way I would trust him for fantasy playing on a second franchise tag. Because if there is a more of a motivation for him to go, you know what, I am gonna milk this season for everything I can. Why would you go out and play knowing they have no barrier to your entry to free agency next year? So I think he's really good, but we'll see what happens with him. Hopefully, I think his best case scenario for fantasy is to stay where he is. I mean, it's by far, I just dropped a podcast on DD this past Sunday. That situation is by far the best situation for a pass catcher in the NFL, especially a guy that's even second in the pecking order. Just the amount of points they create, not just with their quarterback, but how they run their offense. Like there's maybe 5 spots in the league, and half of those he has no chance to go to where it's better for fantasy than where he is right now. Like if you're telling me just because he goes to New England doesn't mean it's better for fantasy. You know what I mean?
It's not better for him.
It's
not better for fantasy football.
It's not better in any capacity unless Washington, you could sell me that could be better. But a lot of these other places, he's
how is it better? That's a lateral move for fantasy football as a whole, for just
correct.
The total fantasy points and the excitement and value of drafts. It's actually not. No, it's better for him to be in Cincinnati because you want to stack with more pocket passing quarterbacks than mobile quarterbacks. So the double stack with Jaden Daniels is not that appealing because he's siphoning too many carries, too many dropbacks out of the offense that become carries instead of knowing every time that guy drops back, he's going to feed one of his receivers. And we have that in Cincinnati. It's goddamn perfect. We had this game on FastDraft called the Flex 4, where you draft 6 guys, the top 4 into your lineup. It's just running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. And one of the strategies in that game is to stay away from negative correlation. So you don't want to stack because there's no quarterback. You're not looking to stack. So last year, you didn't want Adams and Wilson. You didn't want Waddle and Hill. You didn't want multiple receivers in the same team. You were looking to find the receiver that was going to eat the most that year. And ideally, that guy had a lower ADP than his teammate. There was one exception where Josh Larkey did draft both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on FastDraft and finished number 3 overall in the Flex 4 contest, won thousands of dollars. That was the one case where drafting in that format, you actually didn't mind having 2 receivers on the same team because that was the offense. And T. Higgins complements Jamar Chase perfectly. Jamar Chase is more like a Z. He's like explosive Jerry Rice. That's what Jamar Chase is. And Jerry Rice played the Z position in the West Coast offense. And John Taylor played the X out wide. And so that's what it is. To me, this is the 49ers. This is Taylor and Rice. It's just bigger, faster, stronger versions of these 2 guys. I want to keep this together. They're going to be kept together. I brought this up because, A, you've got, Bengals in your background. And what happens with T. Higgins is really, I think, it's sort of an afterthought. Everyone's like, he's going to stay with Cincinnati. It makes no sense for any team, including Washington, to make him an offer that would just be such a gross overpay. And we haven't had an overpay since Bryce Young. That Will Anderson trade, though that Will Anderson trade was, I think, suboptimal for the Texans. They did overpay. In hindsight, because FastDraft also has an all-defense game, we're talking about a top 7 defender in the league, just according to the ADP on FastDraft. So in the last draft, it was Aiden Hutchinson, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Max Crosby, Trey Henderson, Will Anderson at the 107, getting drafted ahead of Nick Bosa. So that ended up working out very well for them. We need some more of that, but I think based on what we've seen the last year and a half in the NFL, it's highly unlikely there's going to be any big swings. I really hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, especially not this year with the quarterback class. Like, I don't see the demand for one of the picks to come get a quarterback this year, even getting anywhere close to where it was for what the Bears got for Bryce Young. So I'm kind of with you. I think the days of those types of trades are done, and I don't know, man. I'm a little selfish from a standpoint of, God, I would love for it to be my team for once. I would love for it to be my team on the receiving end of one of those trades, just because I'm a fan of a team, obviously, that is very not creative when it comes to trading. So that's why I'm kind of putting it out there. I'm kind of trolling everybody on X right now about, please have your favorite team go sign T. Higgins, photoshopping him in other teams' jerseys. Hey, Chargers Nation on Twitter, come get him. Come sign him. You guys really need him. Herbert needs that number 1 receiver, and it would only benefit me. So anyway.
It seems like the way these offenses are run, where the timing is everything, that the Z receiver, if you can play Z well, if you have the explosiveness to play that position and the route running, that's really the path to being a true wide receiver 1 in the NFL. Like, the best X receivers 20, 30 years ago, they were the ones with the best stats. They were the ones getting the most yards. Herman Moore. Remember these guys? Right? They were leading the league in receiving yards. Now it's Jamar Chase. That is the archetype. And the guys behind him are like Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, great intermediate route runners, incredible hands, not necessarily the X receiver types. T. Higgins, I look at as an X receiver. He wins on the outside. He's a clasher. George Pickens. But these are very much like wide receiver 2s in fantasy now, where you really need to be focused in on who is going to command the 10-plus targets a game. Where's Puka Nacua? These are the types of guys. And then 3 years ago, it was Cooper Kupp having the greatest fantasy season. Like, that's the Jerry Rice archetype. That's what we're looking for. And so in general, whenever I'm scouting wide receivers and I'm looking at profiles, I'm not going to be that guy that's going to be going all in on the X receiver profile. I used to be that guy. And I know, like Mike Evans, he's been historic, right? He is going to challenge Jerry Rice, or at least be number 2 in the record books, and within a handful of statistics once he's retired, as a true proper X receiver. But when you look down at who's going in the first round in fantasy drafts, and when you're looking at who's going to be in the draft this year for rookie wide receivers, I'm going to zero in on that 6 foot 210 with explosiveness. That's the guy that I want for the next 10 years in Dynasty.
That's the thing I've seen the last 48 hours is are you on board with the Luther Burden is wide receiver 1 crowd? I've seen it.
He had
quite a bit,
man. His sophomore season was incredible. I love a great sophomore season. And then when the guy flames out in his junior season and decides to come out anyway because scouts are like, you're fine, come on out, that guy is typically an incredible source of value in rookie drafts. Has been for years and years and years and years. Because anything can happen. Everyone is capable of a down season. Everybody's had a bad season throughout their career. There's no, even Jerry Rice. Well, maybe not Jerry, but other than Jerry Rice. Okay, other than Jerry Rice, maybe Jamar Chase? No, well, Jamar Chase, he sat the year out. He sat the COVID year out and didn't play. That doesn't count. Okay, if you don't count that, Jamar Chase has also delivered a great season. He's never had a down season. But yeah, Luther Burden goes from 1,200 yards in 2023 down to 676 yards in 2024. But in that 2023 season, when he was 19 years old, we're talking about 122 targets and a 33% target share at age 19 at Missouri. So that's explosive, super versatile guy right there.
Yeah, and probably more likely to land in a favorable spot. I mean, anybody that's followed me knows that I'm very much, I don't want to say agnostic on players, but I definitely rely on sites like Player Profiler to kind of give me a baseline as to, I'm not going to be drafting specifically off of data or film or either one of those sides. What I'm most interested in, Matt, is just the hive mind of the last couple days. I've seen a ton of prominent people out there in the space talking about Luther Burden is my wide receiver 1. There's not a weakness in his profile. Like, the only thing you have to explain away is the quarterback play from last year. But other than that, like, he checks every box. And why I'm most interested in that is because I know people are seeing those tweets. I know people are buying into that narrative. So I think by the time we get to the actual rookie draft time, like, I think it's going to be one of those where he's going to be seen as a lot of people's wide receiver 1. And his landing spot, I don't think we're going to necessarily delineate between whether he goes in the top 10 or he goes in the top 20. I think people are going to take the landing spot, and they're going to take a player that a lot of people are really high on, and it's going to form this hive mind of, man, I'm just taking Luther Burden everywhere that I can. Not me personally, but the group is going to think that, which is going to make me more likely to want him than, say, even Tet McMillan. There's a lot of people on Tet McMillan that are like, can he only play in the slot? Why didn't he do this? Is he athletic? And like, there's a lot of questions to where I just feel like the sentiment or the priority is, if McMillan is above Burden, the masses in my leagues are going to be thinking Burden is the value. You know what I mean? And I'm interested in that. Who do people like? That's pretty much how I evaluate players these days, given how active dynasty leagues are and how much people play in the moment. They only care about the right now. Very few people are playing dynasty in more than a 1 to 2 year window anymore. So I care about what people care about players today. How do they feel about them right now?
Tet McMillan has his BMI is incredibly low because he's 6'4", 195. So we're going to see where these guys measure in at the combine. That's half the battle. Half of the data that we get that's meaningful on Player Profiler, because it actually drives other metrics like speed score is based on size, is where these guys weigh in at. How tall are they? He's not 6'4".
No, but he's going to have a low BMI. I saw that thing from Kent Lee Platt, who runs Raz. Did you see that? Where there's only been 8 players in the last 5 years drafted in the first round that had a Raz score below 7. And 5 of them were wide receivers. So, like, he's going to be somebody that is going to get draft capital regardless of whether he has, like, a 5 RAS score. But
our athleticism score factors in a player size as well. And the thing is, on Player Profiler, we show the high school testing stats on those recruits that went to those camps. So some of these recruits didn't go to the Nike camps. Like, they came in as lower level recruits, and they made themselves into NFL caliber wide receivers. But a guy like McMillan and a guy like Burden, I mean, Burden came in with like one of the highest scouting grades ever. Like, he's one of the few true 5-star prospects. And a lot of these 5-star prospects, they do not fire at the college level. They're some of them, just completely evaporate. You're like, I remember there were a handful of 5-star prospects. Let me go and check their stats. Oh, this guy barely played. This guy converted to corner. Like, there's all this stuff. It's like, what happened? For Burden to be that highly rated and then also deliver the big season as a sophomore, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. And now that he's probably, McMillan versus Burden at the combine is going to be one of the interesting narratives that will unfold from the combine.
Yeah, it's I'm just torn. I just started getting into this argument over the weekend. I know we didn't even plan on talking about Burden versus McMillan, but I've just seen a month ago, I was going to fall probably more in, Ray's had this thing all offseason and all college football season that Luther Burden was a schemed up touch receiver. Then he's very, very hesitant to buy into a player like that. But I'm literally starting to go the other way, especially if this hive mind is developing around him being maybe not everybody's wide receiver one, but when you have prominent people saying he is their wide receiver one and it's not that close and he's one of the best 10 receivers to come into the league in the last decade, like, I listen to that. I definitely listen to that. And some of those receivers that fit that criteria, I mean, Devontae Smith had a low BMI. Jordan Addison had a low BMI. Like, if he's just at least one of those guys, it feels like there's very little risk, but there's also the potential that either the landing spot or just, his skills by themselves could elevate him. If you told me I'm getting a Jordan Addison or Devontae Smith with a 1-year window to potentially get even more on the market, like, sign me up for that in this class where everybody else is going to be drafting running backs and there's 3 rounds worth of running backs that I can draft.
Well, that's the thing. What are you going to do in the first round? That is a big question this year. Last year it was pretty set. Like, in Superflex, you wanted a quarterback, right? Just get a quarterback, whoever it is, Penix or Knicks, whatever, get a quarterback. It's a great quarterback class. Get a quarterback, get a quarterback, get a quarterback. You can get your running backs next year. You can get your running backs in round 2, 3, 4. Or Neighbors. Okay, or certainly drafting Malik Neighbors was a great idea also. So Neighbors, great, or a quarterback. That was, I think, pretty much a lot of people had that strategy, actually. Because where you had to draft Marvin Harrison Jr., there was typically a quarterback that you really wanted there. So it just didn't make sense. This year, because it's so stockpiled with running backs, going wide receiver in the first round makes a lot of sense. So that cadence of last year where it was quarterback, running back, running back, running back. I mean, that was the team that won the rookie draft on FastDraft last year. Was Daniels, Allen, Bucky Irving, Tyrone, Tracy. And any team that did that in an actual Dynasty rookie draft also accrued a ton of value for their Dynasty team. So that was probably the best pot. That was the nuts cadence, positional cadence for rookie drafts last year. This year, what is the nuts cadence going to be? Is it going to be wide receiver, running back, running back, running back?
Yeah, I've gotten some shit when we do mock drafts every single week, different formats, different groups. It's either myself, Ray, Shane, one of the Dynasty Theory guys. We do mock drafts. And people just kill me, Matt, in the comments. Every time they go, you shouldn't be drafting with a scarcity mindset. Because there's been numerous times where I've gone, man, maybe it's at the 110. And I choose to take a receiver over a running back with the sole reasoning being, I don't want to draft a receiver after these 3 or 4 are gone. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to speculate on what wide receiver taken in the 3rd round is going to be good, because I think the way that people view receivers that are not top 50 picks, that are not even first-round picks, is they're so dependent on the offensive infrastructure that they land in. I think it's going to be very clear who the hive mind sleeper receivers are going to be that get drafted in the 3rd round. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, the Texans take Xavier Restrepo in the 3rd. he's going to be a guy immediately. People are going to say he's going to have a starting role right away. He'll
Right.
vault up a round higher in ADP than his profile says he should go.
Right.
Therefore, he's not going to be a receiver that I'm going to want to take. I'm just going to take the RB 10 that's sitting there on the board instead of him. But it's not going to be like his ADP is going to be in the 4th round of your rookie draft, and then it's going to slowly move up. People are going to immediately dismiss the draft capital in the profile because that's what they've done, or that's what they've seen has worked the last couple of years. They're going to go, oh, Jalen McMillan, that was a mistake. Puka Nacua, that was a mistake. Tank Dell, that was a mistake. So instead of saying he's a 3rd round bad profile receiver, they're just going to see Texans and his ADP is going to be too high. You know what I mean? The receiver that the Ravens draft in the 3rd, I don't care who it is, nobody's going to like him. And that's the guy that's going to fall. So I think receivers, bad profile, later round receivers get adjusted quicker in ADP, making them less of a value. And I'd much rather just take the any running back on a 53, which makes me say, dude, if I can get Igbuka or especially Burden in the 1st, like, I kind of want to do that and just focus on getting as many running backs as I can the rest of the draft and lock my receiver down. That way, everybody else in the league might chase receivers a little bit more aggressively because there was one more off the board. Am I crazy on that? To draft, a single class, assuming that I have picks in multiple rounds, to just take a scarcity mindset and say, I'm actually wanting a receiver earlier? Like, I see people have killed me in the comments and said that's stupid strategy. Just take BPA every round and live with it.
Well, okay. In a mock draft, you're not trading. Okay?
Correct.
So we're not trading, and you can
And you're
only
assuming
use
you have
so
every
many
pick.
running backs on your roster, and every team does need to backfill with wide receivers. And last year, if you drafted wide receivers, you were pretty happy. Even if it didn't work out, like with Rome Odunze, you're still happy you have Rome Odunze. No one out here is like having a fire sale on Rome Odunze. Have you seen that in Dynasty? Have you seen anyone just buying at the buying Odunze at the bottom because he was somehow available?
No, but let's shift it to this discussion, because I think I disagree with one thing you said. I don't need to backfill with receivers. If we're just talking a pretty typical, let's say a start 10 or a start 11 dynasty league, right? I only need 4 or 5 receivers on my roster. Now, I want them to be quality and reliable guys, but I think you can argue, like, what is the point of wasting roster spots on a bunch of receivers hoping that you find 1 or 2 that are usable? You know what I mean? So, like, I don't know if you have to backfill with receivers. I think you want to backfill with receivers that could have value you could move, but I don't necessarily think that's going to be like Xavier Restrepo if he went to the Texans. There really isn't value you can move with him because I think his ADP will be too high because people will immediately take him higher because of his landing spot. You follow?
I'm talking about the receivers out to Lad McConkey.
Okay. We're talking higher pedigree. Yes.
Yeah, the vast majority of them
yes,
retain their value, or they have upside heading into this year. Okay, we know Keon Coleman didn't retain his value. Okay, but he wasn't drafted that high. He wasn't a first-round pick in many drafts last year. He was mostly a second-rounder. So Xavier Worthy rose in value, right? Neighbors rose in value.
Ricky Pearsall. But I think Pearsall.
You could argue Pearsall, even though he didn't produce, just like a Dunze, his value based on the situation's higher.
He produced at the end when people remember, and he's going to have favorable attrition on his team where people get duped into thinking he's great because he's going to have opportunity going into the year. So if you drafted Pearsall where he was going, you are sitting on a profit-making piece. Now, should you decide to not move it and then hope Ricky Pearsall is a 15-point-per-game receiver, that's where you get into trouble. But if you said, I want to trade him right now, you can get a higher pick relative to last year than you drafted him with. So I think he is a profit. He was a profit-making player, just like you mentioned with those others.
You got to wait, though. You got to wait. You got to wait for more reports to come out that actually Brandon Ayuk's not going to start the year. He's going to be on the PUP. He's not going to be on the active roster. You got to have the reports of Deebo Samuel getting traded. You got to get those confirmed. You got to get him traded. Then you might actually get the 49ers not drafting a wide receiver in round 1 or 2. And then everything just completely falling perfectly this offseason. Everything could fall so perfectly for Ricky Pearsall. And I think you still keep waiting. Because, okay, the pieces all fall. The chessboard is set, right? It's set up for checkmate. What's the one thing? Okay, let's pour gasoline on it's a wooden chessboard. We're pouring gasoline on the chessboard. Okay? What's the final thing that you need before you make that trade of Ricky Pearsall and you let him go? What's the match strike that you need?
A Brock Purdy extension?
That would be great. That's part of everything falling into place. That's part of the chessboard. What you need is a spectacular play in training camp.
His chemistry with Brock Purdy is uncanny. We've never seen a connection like this with the Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan offense, and they're in lockstep, right?
And he's just got maybe pads, but no pants, like just shorts, right? So they got shoulder pads and shorts. And he makes another like one-hand catch in the back of the end zone or something in camp. And then people are playing the two catches, the one-hand catch from Florida and the one-hand catch from training camp back to back, or they're juxtaposing them. And it's just, that's when it's going to be maximum frothy. We're talking about like late July. Remember?
Don't forget the training camp piece also, where he's finally recovered from being shot, and he's made up for all of that time that he's missed with Purdy. And
yes, because you've also got
he's mastered the offense,
the pictures from the gym, the pictures from the weightlifting,
all of that.
Because he couldn't work out because he was recovering from the gunshot wound. And remember, there's going to be all these stories written about how last year was just a complete washout for all these reasons, so many reasons. The 49ers team imploded and just everything. And yet this guy still was producing at the end. You can really paint a picture, man. I mean, with bright colors on the hype around this guy, where I could argue it'll be as frothy for Ricky Pearsall as any sleeper player in all of fantasy.
Matt, that's Dynasty today. What we just went through with one player in one situation, like this is where my mind goes whenever you're hypothetically seeing this player drafted here or this move being made by this team. Like, I think these are the things that all you got to do is sit back. I mean, pick two of your favorite players, just talking to the crowd. Pick two of your favorite players and just go through these exercises. You know, what is the narrative going to be with, could be a new coach, a new coordinator, a new offense, a new scheme, all of those things, and just kind of talk through how are the masses going to react when the inevitable news of, you know, the offense with the Bears is really, really looking so much better under Ben Johnson. Man, the early install in OTAs looks nothing like the last 5 years of Bears offense, and it's looking exactly like it looked early on in Detroit. And then I'm sure they're going to draft a running back that looks like David Montgomery, and they have their David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs with Swift and that guy. And it just, that's why you would want Caleb Williams, not because he is a credible fantasy quarterback, but because that type of narrative is it's going to be told. I don't even need to say it might be told. You're going to have people that are saying these things. You already know it's going to happen. So, I mean, that's how I would view a situation like that. Like all of the Bears, there's going to be positive momentum. And you could probably think of ones where there's completely negative momentum.
It's hard to go wrong with the replaying last year's picks from the first round and even into the second round. A lot of these guys are going to have their value salvaged one way or the other this offseason. Caleb Williams, you mentioned. Ricky Pearsall, we mentioned. I can see it playing out with Keon Coleman. I can see 100%. His value reinflated. I can see the buoying of Xavier Legette. I could absolutely see the story around Xavier Legette. Oh, yeah.
think that
Oh, wow. The growth and development in the offseason and his rapport with Bryce Young. And again, with the shoulder pads and the shorts in training camp. And, the guidance he's getting from Adam Thielen. We can go on and on, dude.
That was a little bit of a stretch, but okay, I got you. I got you.
I'm just saying. I mean, you're going to...
All of these
they
exist.
will write it all. It will
unless
be
you drafted
written.
a running back last year. Unless you drafted a running back last year. That's really the only one I think that you're not feeling too good. I know you. I heard you a couple weeks ago talking about Blake Corum being somebody that you think is insulated. I don't know, Matt. I don't know.
Well,
I don't think any running back from last year is insulated.
He's insulated from further losses, but unless there's an injury to Kyren Williams in the offseason, his value isn't ever going to approach what it was last year during rookie draft season. It's not going to happen. Kyren Williams stayed healthy and exceeded expectations. So Jonathan Brooks, that was one of the more unnecessary risks I've ever seen fantasy gamers take. Just the willingness to just let it go and light it on fire. I mean, he was a meme coin. Jonathan Brooks was a meme coin where you're like, who are these people? Who are these people buying the Melania Trump coin? Who are these people drafting Jonathan Brooks in any format? It's like, you could take anyone that's healthy or the guy with one season and a torn ACL. What are we doing here?
When you mentioned the meme coins, the only people you hear about that bought those meme coins are the ones that are stuck holding the bag, though, right? There were a lot of people. I mean, I remember talking about Jonathan Brooks saying one of the arguments to draft him, despite the injury risk, was that unlike a lot of other players, he's not going to be susceptible to people casting him off quickly if he is not as good as everybody said, because he has this ramp-up window where the exact same narrative we were just talking about, it existed with Jonathan Brooks, right? After a month, he was starting to practice. Halfway through the season, he was ramping up, and then he actually played. You probably could have held an asset that was only going to accrue in value until that moment that he played, and then a couple games later, he got hurt. So, I mean, that's unfortunate, but I think you could have told yourself a story if you would have had the proper perspective on why you were taking him. Because I could see the ramp up argument narrative with his value last year because he wasn't going to fail right away because he wasn't even going to be on the field.
The reactivation window was open. He's got 21 days, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Now is the time. Now is the time to get him on the block in Dynasty. Now is the time to get the hell out. Because Chuba had already happened. Chuba was already headed toward a big contract. It's just the conventional wisdom was, well, this won't be in Carolina. They're not that crazy. This is the same franchise that sold it all for Bryce Young. So yes, this they absolutely could do that. We talk about the suboptimal moves by front offices evaporating, and we just don't get that. Well, you could argue for them to extend Chuba Hubbard when they did, everyone was dumbfounded. And you could argue that's just not a great use of capital. You shouldn't be investing that kind of capital. If it's going to be a running back, it better be a Saquon Barkley. If not Saquon, then a Josh Jacobs. Putting that kind of money into a Chuba Hubbard, a lower level talent, is a bad use of resources. And it is. I mean, there's very few running back contracts where I'm like, oh, that was a steal. Right? Even a lot of the cheap ones have been bad contracts, like Miles Sanders before that in Carolina. Most of them have been bad. I mean, this Saquon Barkley has really wiped the brain of so many football analysts. It's just forgetting all the bad running back contracts that are the reason why running back valuations have been in decline for so many years, has been all these Miles Sanders type contracts. So, I mean, regardless, it was in play that Chuba was going to get an extension. And it just was a lack of imagination by people just assuming Jonathan Brooks is coming back and it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. He's coming back and it's going to be fine. I mean, I'm guilty of this a little bit, right? I'm guilty of this with Rome Odunze. I'll admit it. We all have these blind spots. I'm sure you do, where I could really rock myself to sleep at night and feel just fine about Rome Odunze and have no reason to even engage in trade talks around Rome Odunze. He's going to be an alpha. He's amazing. Shut up.
Yeah, I think the running backs specifically last year, they found their level with guys like Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift. Like the market bounced back to where getting that, what did Chuba Hubbard get? It was like $8.5, $9 million for 3 years, something like that, I believe. Like that's basically what these secondary, 60% part of a committee backfields are going to get paid. So does that mean anything for how good they're going to be or whether that's a smart investment for the team? I don't think so, but I do think it does disrupt backfields for Dynasty. It disrupts what people think of the backfields. I mean, I don't think that is going to stop, Matt. You're going to see a lot of running backs over the next couple of years that get those types of contracts, and a lot of NFL teams are going to be fine paying it. I mean, you're going to see Najee Harris probably get an even bigger deal than that.
Well,
this year.
that's the big one.
And
that's the one I want to talk about because that is going to be big. I mean, Najee Harris, his timing was so perfect. I mean, thank God for the franchise tag, right? He's like, was he franchise tagged?
No, thank God they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. And he's going, I get to hit free agency in a free agency class where there isn't anybody else. So I think he's probably going to get a similar deal, if not more, than what Hubbard got.
Well, I was thinking, thank God he was the class that he is.
Yes.
Actually, no. He can't.
Nope.
He did play 4 years at Alabama,
correct.
Right? So he could have come out early.
He could have come out early.
Right. He could have come out early. Had he come out early, then he would have been exposed to this pre-Saquon, told you so running back market.
Yep.
Now he comes out and he's like, who's ready? Who's ready to go win a Super Bowl with this running back?
Well,
need a running back? I'm here. Let's go.
Imagine if he would have been a free agent last year when you had
this is what I'm saying.
Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. All of these guys were available. Josh Jacobs.
Thank God I stayed in school.
He gets lost in the sauce with all of those guys. You know what I mean? He's just another guy in the mix of everybody's going to get one, but he probably is not going to have much argument on the market because there's going to be a bunch of other players that can do similar things. So
how could you not be trading for this guy in Dynasty?
I mean, have we jumped the shark on trading for him in Dynasty? Everyone knows he's going to be in free agency now. Can you even trade for him at a price that is you're worth trading for him? Which I would rather trade for Travis.
It used to be the case that there were relatively uninformed people in Dynasty leagues. With the prevalence of podcasts and so many YouTube shows like yours and others, it's just a lot less likely you're going to stumble onto someone who doesn't realize that Najee Harris is about to get a valuation spike.
Well, you got to do it now. And over the next couple weeks before free agency hits, that's your only shot. But as soon as he signs, you can just picture it today. Let's fast forward to, what are we talking about? We're talking 20 days from now until the legal tampering period starts. I think it's like Sunday night, Monday morning when that legal tampering period starts. Can you imagine if you get the news Najee Harris has inked a 3-year, $32 million deal with the Chargers?
Is it going to be $40 million at this point?
And
I don't even know
whatever it is.
There are so many people that came at me when I said that Saquon Barkley's contribution to the Eagles championship was overstated.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I was nodding my head the entire time you were saying that too, and I don't think it wasn't reciprocated by anybody else, but I was nodding my head the entire time. Continue.
So I have no idea what the running back market is. We have no idea what we've learned from Hard Knocks, and specifically this New York Giants debacle of a Hard Knocks, is the things that these guys use to make decisions, the things that drive them, are a lot of the same things that people are talking about on talk radio. In fact, they're talking about talk radio in the office, just like anybody else. It's not like they're gonna just go based on feel. Like John Morrow's like, hey, I don't know if I could live with myself if we let Barkley go. And then his employee just let Barkley go, essentially, to a division rival. I just thought that was pretty galling. And it's like, how long is Joe Schoen gonna keep his job in New York? Is he still there? Like, it's the arrogance that these GMs have, and is just reinforced when other GMs look around and go, hey, Joe Schoen's still there. We really can do whatever the fuck we want. They will fire 3 coaches before they fire us.
Do you find it interesting that you can have the same person that'll tell you that Pittsburgh, when Najee Harris departs, is a great spot for a rookie running back, but yet Najee Harris going to the Chargers would be a great spot for Najee Harris? Do you agree with that? Doesn't that logic oppose each other, right? Like, the Steelers basically said Najee Harris is not even worth keeping on his 5th-year option. Like, he can go. But yet, it's a great landing spot if a running back lands there. I mean, anytime a running back is mocked to the Steelers, that is a player people are like, oh, that's going to be the Najee Harris role. He's going to immediately be the starter. We did a mock the other day. They had Damian Martinez going to the Steelers in the 7th round. And he still got drafted in the 2nd round of the rookie draft. And I can't argue it if he's playing the Najee Harris role. But don't you think it's interesting that people will sell themselves on it being a great spot in Pittsburgh, yet they're letting Najee Harris go, and that's never used as an indictment on Najee Harris himself? I don't know. I'm trying to decipher through that logic when it seems like only one of those things could be true. It's either the Steelers are making a mistake letting Najee walk, or he shouldn't be somebody that people absolutely go gaga over when he lands on the Chargers and all of a sudden he's going to be their starter. I don't know. I'm talking through it live here on the air.
1 subscriber away on YouTube, 1 subscriber away from 28K. Thanks to my man, Alex McQuarter, in the chat, reminding everybody you should absolutely subscribe to the show. We're going to be having some incredible live shows and videos that I'm going to be posting. I have several video series that I'm planning right now. It's going to be a big year for content. You will want to be subscribed to the Player Profiler YouTube channel, as well as Player Profiler Now. So Now has even more live streams than the Player Profiler channel. Najee Harris, on screen right now, is the definition of mediocrity. There's never been a better
100%.
There's never been a better example of a 3-year stretch of mediocrity in the history of the running back position, where he's in the zone of 250 to 275 carries. He's in the zone of 1,030 and 1,050 rushing yards. He's averaging 4.0 yards per carry. He's averaging 35 receptions. And he's averaging 230 receiving yards with an average of 8 touchdowns and precisely like 12.2 fantasy points per game. I mean, gross. And you can't blame it all on the Pittsburgh offensive line. I think what you're saying is because the offensive line is one of the weakest run blocking units, and they're just young and they're in transition, and maybe they capitalize on some continuity in 2025, and it becomes a better spot for a rookie running back. But the offense and the offensive line being below average means that even if there's a lot of vacated touches, doesn't necessarily mean it's a great backfield for a rookie to land in. The Chargers are definitively the incredible spot where you know that their blocking on both pass blocking and run blocking is going to be improved this year because they have so much young talent at the offensive line positions. I mean, key guys like Joe Alt that are going to be maturing and getting better as a unit. Also, the second year with the coaching staff. I mean, everything is teed up for whoever is the lead back with the Chargers. That includes Najee Harris. So you have Najee Harris is a Charger. I like it. I like him. He's gonna be breaking long runs just because even though he is mediocre, you put a mediocre running back in that system, he's gonna go for 15 fantasy points per game, and that's gonna be a guy you can just set it and forget it.
Couple fun facts on Najee, Matt. Born in Northern California, so probably wouldn't hate going out back west, right?
Right.
He was down to 2 schools in college before he committed to Alabama. The other school that recruited him the most, and actually his last recruiting visit, was to none other than the University of Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. So he knows Jim Harbaugh very well. I said he would go to the Chargers a year ago. I maintain that. The best skill that Najee Harris has that I think we have dismissed for years in Dynasty is I don't want to say he's as good as Joe Mixon or Josh Jacobs, but he has the same skill set. And you know what that skill set is? He can convince an NFL team that he deserves as many touches as he can handle.
Right.
Over and over and over until he is so bad that he just washes out of the league. Once he's on your roster, you're going to go, we got to run the running game through that guy. He's averaged 19 and a half opportunities a game for his career. So that's going to translate. He's going to get at least 2 years of, well, we paid him. We got to give him the ball. Now, if he doesn't do anything with the ball, if they bring in somebody more dynamic, a better receiver, whatever it might be, fine. But he's just such a safe bet, especially if he goes there to just be, he is your plotting. He's going to be top 10 in the league in opportunity share. He's going to finish anywhere between RB7 and RB18, depending on his touchdowns. And then also depending on like the neutral pass rate or the running back target rate of the quarterback, which last year the Chargers were actually 6th in neutral pass rate. People don't talk about that, but the Chargers are a team that want to pass. Believe it or not, they are not a team that just wants to run. But if Najee Harris is on the field for 75% of the plays, what's he going to get? He's going to get the Carlos Hyde 60-catch season, not because he's good, just because he's out there. And that is his talent, is he can con a team into paying him, which then they're going to go, well, we have to just use this guy until we can't anymore. So he's if you can get him between now and the legal tampering period and you can pay a pick instead of drafting the RB 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in this class, which can be completely dependent on where those players land, I'm fine doing it. But you got to do it now. Don't wait till he signs. Then it's too late. Then you're paying a future first. As soon as I'm paying a future first for a guy like that, I'm backing off. But if I can do it in any other way, then I'm doing it now.
You have to at least put it out there. You have to find the guy who has Harris and just try to engage with him in your league. That's the way to do it. And there are, like, in the way too early best ball, right? You got Underdog, you got FastDraft, Flex 4 game. Last year, 4 of the 6 players on the winning team were running backs, and some of them were gross running backs. If you look at the top 2 teams, one of them drafted Joe Mixon, one of them drafted Josh Jacobs. Like, these were running backs headed to free agency that a lot of people were just not that excited about. They're like, they land in the right situation, I'm interested. And they did. They both did. Just like what's going to happen with Najee Harris. And so, yeah, Najee Harris, incredible value in all these formats, FastDraft in particular. So, yeah, that's an easy one. That's an easy one where it's just like, hey, I'm not as interested in talent level at the running back position. I'm just not. Like, there's way too many seasons where guys where at the wide receiver position, You got to you have to have a base level of talent, and the first round wide receivers, like we talk about base level of talent, Burden, Tet McMillan in particular, they're the players, and Igbuka, they have the resume to sustain their value in Dynasty. Once you get past them, it falls off so hugely. Yet these guys are getting drafted. Isaiah Bond, they're all getting drafted. Don't worry. There are plenty of drafters in your rookie drafts that are going to be taking these guys and letting running backs fall to you. So, I mean, I'm maybe never been more on board projecting a target cadence for rookie drafts, which is wide receiver, running back, running back, running back. Certainly you don't want to predestine your team. You want to be flexible just in case great value falls to you. But if you just want to say, hey, McMillan and Burden and even Igbuka, these are guys I really want in round one, even though it might mean I miss out on Devin Neal, whoever, don't worry. There's so many good running backs. You'll have a great running back that's not quite Devin Neal, but close around later. But the differential between McMillan, Burden, and whatever wide receiver is going to be there in round two is just such a chasm.
Well, what's interesting is, what do we use once a receiver gets into the NFL, right? What do we use as basically the primary way statistically of measuring whether that receiver's good or not? I mean, we have the Trinity at DD. There's a lot of other advanced metrics you can use. But what is the one fundamental stat that you hear people cite all the time for receivers to just generally say, is that guy good or not?
Yards per route run.
Okay, even more basic than that.
Oh.
Target share, right?
Right, okay.
Target share.
Sure.
You got to have at least a 20% target share. You might not be that good, whatever it might be, right? Do we ever apply that to running backs, though? Do we ever look at a running back and go, he has 5 straight years of earning a rush share of this? Do we ever say that's a skill? You know what I mean? We give receivers credit for getting the ball.
Yeah.
But when a running back earns opportunity over and over and over and over, beating out other players in their backfield, even though
I think we've already convinced everybody on Najee Harris. Do you really?
No,
I feel like you're really you may be Najee Harris's agent at this point.
Well, no, I had a deeper point though, because a lot of the running back decisions that you're going to be making over some of these other picks are not going to be guys that are guaranteed an opportunity share, Matt. Just because you're a third-round running back in a good spot doesn't mean we immediately go, oh, you're going to have an opportunity share that makes you relevant. You still have to earn it. But we don't look at it that way. We just assume, oh, this guy landed in a good spot in round 3. He's just going to be handed that opportunity share. You know what I mean? Like, we do that with running backs, yet receivers, we go, oh, we have to see it first. We have to see, like, this guy can earn targets at the NFL level before we'll give him that credit. I don't know. It's interesting. Something that's I've been working through in my head with this year's running back class, because I think you're going to see a bunch of running backs go on day 2, late day 2, and then early day 3. And how much does that actually matter, that draft capital? Anywhere between RB, let's just say pick 75 and pick 150 in the NFL draft. Does it even matter in that range?
Well, all the guys that got drafted earlier last year are the ones that didn't produce. And the guys that went in 4th and 5th round are the ones that produced. Tyrone Tracy, Bucky Irving. Blake Corum, nowhere to be found.
Mm-hmm. Unless it's top 50 or higher, like I can't really even look at draft capital to say I'm breaking ties with running backs, which is going to create just a mishmash of a bunch of guys, which makes me even more likely to say I just need as many of them as I can get and fade drafting the RB6. Let's say whoever the RB6 of the class is going to be, RB5. Like that guy's probably going to go in the 2nd or 3rd round, but it's still going to be somebody that's going to have to do the same earning of opportunity, just like your favorite running back that goes in round 4. So that was kind of my point. It's not a Najee Harris point anymore. This is back to the receiver versus running back conversation.
I know, but it blended so well and it helped Najee so much
It
that I was like, that's pretty much. Yeah. Yes, you want Jeanty this year at the 101, but the beauty is it's such a difficult debate after Jeanty of who is the 102, who's the 103, who's the 104. Everybody has a different top 5 running backs. So that's where you could take advantage and just say, hey, whoever slips. And, you know, if I can get Jeanty, great. At that point, you know, I'm targeting again, if Burden tests well, that's going to be the big story of the combine is Burden blazing and setting everybody. It will set everybody's mind at ease, and he will test well. If he tested well in high school, he's probably going to test well at the NFL scouting combine. And then him versus McMillan will suddenly become a debate, and they'll both rise up. And then you're going to see drafts that go Jeanty, Burden, McMillan. Those are drafts that'll happen. Absolutely, just like we saw in some previous years. That's how it played out. Boom, boom, boom. So,
Yeah, agree.
I mean, through Devin Neal, right? If you got Caleb Johnson, you got Omarion Hampton, you got Judkins, you got Neal, you got Gordon, you got TreVeyon Henderson. I saw someone in this Origins All Rookie game on FastDraft was able to get at the 110, 201 turn Henderson and Judkins back to back, which I think is fun. I think that's a fun thing. I think that's a fun thing that could absolutely play out this year in Superflex drafts. Is at the end of the first round, people are able to get both Ohio State running backs. It kind of depends. Again, it'll depend on testing. If one of them absolutely blows minds at the combine, then they're gonna pop up in the first round. But it's possible as of the information we have now. That's kind of a fun thing. Is you gotta hedge, who was better in college and who was crowding who out for opportunities. Well, I got them both. I'm fine.
Have you followed have you kind of noticed the hive mind for TreVeyon Henderson over the last couple of weeks? Ever since Todd McShay came out and said, "Oh man, I think he's going to go in the first round." It's now I've seen more people that have him in their top 2 or top 3 now compared to when draft season started. Kind of feels like he might be the one that is the riskiest, unless he does go. If he goes in the first round, that's going to change his profile a little bit. But if he doesn't, kind of feels like people are living off their laurels a little bit on TreVeyon from where he was. I don't know. Do you have a convicted take on where you'd slot him in? Because I think that I've seen people that I trust say he's not somebody you're going to just assume is going to be a 3-down back in the NFL that's going to be able to handle an opportunity share as large as some of the elite running backs. Yet you also see people saying, if there's a Jahmyr Gibbs in this class, it's TreVeyon Henderson. I'm like, let's pump the brakes a little bit. But I don't know if he goes in the first round, like that narrative will be there. Even if you don't think it's true, like if he goes in the first round, he's RB2 and it's not even close because he's got the name to back it. Caleb Johnson doesn't. So I don't know.
He was a 5-star recruit. So he's basically the Luther Burden, except he didn't come out early.
And he was anointed the next guy from his freshman season. Like people remember he was the next Bijan. He was the next, you know what I mean? He was the next Bijan a year after, and he didn't end up coming out. But still, like he had that name ingrained in people's minds for a couple years, even before this year.
He didn't command that many opportunities in 10 games, 156 carries in 2023. So you can understand why he didn't come out. But then again, it's like, okay, well, why didn't he have a better year? Okay. Well, it's not possible that a guy like that is sort of becomes the 1B in a backfield, and then he comes out and is the second running back drafted and puts up like a Jahmyr Gibbs type season. I mean, he capped out at 27 receptions. He did it, interestingly, 27 receptions as a freshman and as a senior. I don't know if that's ever been done. the same number of catches as a freshman and a senior. That's just hard to do. He is going to be very fast at the combine. That we know. And that is going to get people super, super jazzed. We're talking 2 seasons with 25 plus catches and then the speed. And he's bigger than Jahmyr Gibbs. He's like 10 pounds heavier than Jahmyr Gibbs. This is why this class is generating so much enthusiasm. But what I'm saying is there's just no way. There's no way we put him ahead of Hampton. There's no way we put him ahead of Johnson. I just don't know. I want to see the guy that's the workhorse, that's putting up the 20 touchdowns with the 1,500 yards. That's going to be my guy. And okay, right? There's too many slasher type running backs that have that TreVeyon Henderson play style that have not fired in the NFL. Now recently, like a James Cook, like it's worked out. It's worked out. I did not expect James Cook to work out this well. James Cook has surprised me. Has he surprised you with how productive he's been, given his profile at Georgia, that he's undersized, that he's actually not the most efficient receiver? Just happens to be in the great situation of all time.
Everything his profile said he was not coming out, he has become. It's in the NFL. So it's one of those where you look back and you go, we could pull up the clips from when he came out, and it was everything that he's done the last 2 years. You know what I mean? There's no way he'll command an entire workload of the backfield, and he was I think 7th in opportunity share this year. If he does great, it's going to be because he is an elite receiver and an explosive player. But then you look at that's not what he's been. And then you're going to go, well, he's going to lose all these touchdowns because of Josh Allen, and he leads the league in touchdowns. So
just insane.
Yeah.
He was essentially this past year, he was discount Saquon Barkley. I mean, it was a similar situation. Oh, going to lose all these touchdowns because of the tush push. And no, like it was. So I have to rely on the decade of doing this and all these examples back through time where I'm like, okay, this is not my primary skill set that I'm going to chase in rookie drafts, is this TreVeyon Henderson skill set. Even though lately I've, it certainly has prevented me acquiring maximum talent at the position in fantasy drafts because, you know, I haven't been able to get all the way on board with a Kyron Williams. I have not been able to get all the way on board with a James Cook. And these guys are staying healthy the entire season. They're scoring all these touchdowns. They're dominating the backfield in spite of the third round pick with Blake Corum. It's not mattering. And if it were 5 years ago, I'm sure I'd be way more tilted over it and changing my positions and changing my philosophy and being like, all right, we're pivoting here. I want James Cook archetypes. I'm not doing it, dude. I'm not going to do it. I mean, this is where conviction is not necessarily in a particular player. If a player is not what you thought he was, you got to move on. You got to change. You got to change your assessment with new information. But it's going to take more than just a couple. I still believe you could call James Cook and Kyron Williams outliers based on their size, based on their role. It's very difficult to imagine that this is just the new NFL. This could just be, you know, a moment in time that we had in the 2024 season, and we look back and we're like, I'm glad I didn't fall for the banana in the tailpipe.
Want to hear a cool stat on James Cook? So he actually led the NFL in one category last year that I think will open the eyes to exactly what you're talking about. So if you take his fantasy production with and without touchdowns, he had the highest percentage of drop-off when you remove the touchdowns. So if you just give him the league average touchdown rate based on his workload, he had the most points scored above what you would expect because of the touchdowns. And that's just not something I'm willing to bet on. I mean, I was just going to ask you about TreVeyon Henderson.
Can't do it.
If I told you TreVeyon Henderson, and I'll throw this to the chat too, because I'm sure people hear this name and they just start to puke thinking about drafting TreVeyon Henderson as high as they're going to. Matt, if he has DeAndre Swift's career, would you be happy with the pick if you used a mid-first round pick on him? Because you look at how DeAndre Swift's career has played out. You look at what he's done year after year, from year 1 to year 5, how he's scored his points, his opportunity share in the offenses that he's been in. Like that feels more like what you're getting from TreVeyon Henderson. And then I look at that and I say, would you take that or not? He's averaged almost 14 points a game for his career with a 20+% target rate. So, I mean, I think I just want to put that name out there because I think people just assume. Now, if you're going to sell me that the asset TreVeyon Henderson can give you more than DeAndre Swift, certainly, especially with Swift going into his 6th year. But if you're drafting him because you think he is the next Jahmyr Gibbs and the next whoever it might be, Bijan Robinson, whatever your comparison might be, like I think he's probably more in the Swift range. And people just hear that outcome and they immediately goes, no way, you're crazy. I don't know.
Look at the DeAndre Swift explosive plays on Player Profiler. Go look at the explosive plays. His rush EPX was near league bottom, 37th in the league. And that's among qualified running backs. There's not that many, more than 50. But his receiving EPX was top 10. And this has been who he is. In the receiving game, he's super efficient. But he doesn't command enough targets for whatever reason. And instead, teams that want to get him the ball are forced to hand it to him. And when you hand it off to him, he gives you the bare minimum. And he has been just as average in fantasy points per game as Najee Harris the last 3 years, except he's done it in vastly different ways. Like he had the Najee Harris season where he had 1,050 yards rushing and only 39 catches in 16 games. And then he had the season where he had 50 catches and 8 touchdowns and 400 receiving yards, but he only had 99 carries. So he's had this super volatile opportunity share and touch distribution with the same outcome in the fantasy points per game column, whereas Najee, every single stat has been the same year over year. With Swift, he has produced. He hasn't been a bust. It didn't kill you. Like there's been plenty of Ronald Joneses and now Jonathan Brooks. There's just been plenty of running backs that have really, they've cost you. But even the Ronald Jones, Jonathan Brooks, yes, the sell window was so small. We're talking about whatever it was, a few weeks you could have got out of Jonathan Brooks. Most of these guys, Swift included, there are months where you can get out. There were months where all the best ball bros were all in on Ronald Jones. And you had plenty of opportunity to get out. It's these damn receivers, man. It's these receivers that are drafted outside the top 40. They don't have the top 40 draft capital. They're the ones that go poof, and there's never a bounce. You don't get that dead cat bounce with any of these wide receivers that don't get that opportunity in year 1, don't get that opportunity in year 2. You're talking 1 out of 100 that are Nico Collins. Mostly, you'll never get that back. There never was a window. Like I'm telling you, Keon Coleman will give you a secondary window. It's not going to be dollar for dollar, but you'll get your secondary window with a spectacular catch in training camp. But it's all the more reason why I just slap my forehead when I see these picks getting wasted in round 3, round 4 on wide receivers. Like Restrepo. It's a perfect example. Fucking Restrepo over a running back?
Yeah, funny story at the Senior Bowl. I was sitting there, Ray and I were sitting there watching right when we arrived, right? And we were way up. We like to go and sit in the way top of the stadium just to get a better view, right? But Matt, I tell you, for 10 minutes, I couldn't tell the difference between Restrepo and Damian Martinez. And, they both had the same helmet. They were both wearing single-digit numbers. I think it was 6 and 0, and my bad eyes can't see that far away. And I'm going, dude, Ray, I think that's Damian Martinez, that small, squatty guy over there. Like, no, but that's the receivers. Now it was Restrepo. Like, from far, you're like, this is a small satellite back, and then he gets out there and starts. I mean, he looks okay, but yeah, that's you can immediately tell that's the type of profile that people will vault up way too high compared to what his profile or his skill set would say, just based on a landing spot. I mean, look at last year's receiver room from. I'm going to rip through these names. Jalen Polk, A.D. Mitchell, Malachi Corley, Jermaine Burton, Roman Wilson. Okay, Jalen McMillan. We'll give him that one. Luke McCaffrey, Troy Franklin, Javon Baker, Devontae Walker. That was mid-round 2 to early round 4 right there. One guy. I mean, there wasn't even – there might have been a small – I mean, I'm talking small window on A.D. Mitchell or Jermaine Burton. But it was like a week, and if you didn't make the move then
no way you fell for Burton.
I fell for Burton, but my theory was that there's going to be a narrative, and there would have been a narrative if T. Higgins was gone and Burton would have done shit, but he didn't, and that narrative doesn't exist. But the point is, a lot of those guys, you nailed the point. They never had a narrative. There was never a narrative one day for Malachi Corley. His best play was the Thursday night touchdown that he took, and then he dropped the ball before the goal line. Remember that one?
Woof.
That would have been the play where you could have gone, okay, maybe he is that Deebo Samuel role, but he didn't even complete the damn touchdown. So there wasn't a window for any of these guys. And that's the risk when you draft these day 3 receivers is you have to, not even day 3, but even the third round receivers, the late second round receivers. Like, you have to tell yourself a story and be prepared when that narrative comes up. Do you have the discipline to sell? Did you have the discipline to sell A.D. Mitchell when Joe Flacco took over? People were buying him. That you could have gotten rid of him for the price you would have paid. You know what I mean? But you had a couple week window, and then, hell, you had 2 games, and when you realize, wait a second, he's the wide receiver 4 on the Colts, there was no more window. So you have to have a different plan if you're drafting these late receivers in lieu of a running back. Because a running back, the chat nailed it. Like, you had 6 sell windows on DeAndre Swift. Yeah. They were volatile, but every offseason, there was a point in the offseason where you could have said, hey, that guy's going to get some work. You know what I mean? Like, you had a window on a running back that can at least survive and show that they belong even in a committee backfield.
I mean, we'll see what happens in the draft. We could have another window.
Oh, yeah.
We could have another window. There's no lock.
Can't you see
the Bears are going Jeanty? You could absolutely see them just being like, hey, we like Roschon Johnson.
The Bears draft Ollie Gordon in the 4th, Matt. And all of a sudden, you have this Swift Ollie Gordon backfield, and people go, wait, that looks a lot like Montgomery and Gibbs. It's not. But I don't care if it's not. It's Ben Johnson's offense with 2 like-type running backs. I guarantee you people will buy into the pass catcher if that's the situation.
Woody Marks.
So we may have another window on Swift.
Right? You don't know who they like.
We don't.
Their scouts might really like Woody Marks. We don't know it. But there's a couple of guys they've circled in round 3, round 4, and they're like, if they fall to us here, if they fall to us, this is what we're going to do. Or they get talked into like, hey, there's so much talent at this position. We know they're going to be available. I mean, that's what I would be saying. If it would be, I think I could get it done. I think I could do it if I were in the room talking about the Bears big board, and I had my laptop. I think I would. Of course, I would speak up, and I think I could get them off Jeanty. I think I could. If they were leaning Jeanty there, I think I could get him off it. I think I could lay out a case for, optimizing draft capital, and that would. It's just going to be hard, man. It's going to be hard after the Saquon Barkley Super Bowl. It's just going to be. I could see people rolling their eyes with me laying this argument out in the Bears war room.
So we agree they are drafting a running back in the first 4 rounds, right? Like guaranteed they're going to take one.
Yeah, sure. Of course they are. But that's a huge difference. Round 1 versus round 4 is everything.
Well, but I want to talk. I mean, this is how I play Dynasty. I want to talk through real quick with you. If you're sitting on Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift right now, you don't know if they're going to take Jeanty or they're going to take Ollie Gordon in the 5th. Like, you don't know. Either of those could be true or somewhere in between. But how do you play each one of the individual pieces, right?
You can't we already trade talked about Swift. Either of these guys right now. They are untradeable. Okay.
You think so, though? Or do you think it's just the price of what they could be for your roster if the Bears don't take a top 3 round running back, that you're like, I don't want to give away DeAndre Swift for a 2/3. I'd rather hold and see what happens, where if they take Jeanty, he's completely nuked. But if they don't, you have an asset that you probably would have paid a 2nd for going into the season. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how do you play it because people don't care about what they're going to do. When they're going to do it, they're going to react. But if you have Swift right now, like, I know you're not a big Swift fan, but if you're holding Swift or Roschon,
I actually might be trading for him.
I can see the narrative. But, like, if you have Roschon Johnson right now, is he just a guy that is worth so little to other people that you might as well just hold that chip, and if it
squad all day.
Yeah,
he's the most taxi squatted. Corum and Roschon are my taxi squatted guys. Like, they're going to be there. I am truthering. I have conviction. Like, don't even ask.
How does Roschon survive the offseason? Well, what would be the best case scenario for him if the Bears do draft a running back? Is it they draft a poorer version of Swift, that like a Brashard Smith type? Would that be good if you have Roschon?
They're not going to go that low. I think they.
What if they do though?
They're going top 10 running back. They're going to go. It's Jeanty through Woody Marks.
Okay.
Is the running back zone, I think, is in the range of outcomes for the Bears. But most people, human beings, don't think in terms of range of outcomes. We try to be disciplined fantasy gamers and always do it, but like we talked about, we're guilty of not always being able to do that. I am anchored to some Roma Dunze enthusiasm and previous positions that I know I just can't get 100% away from. It's not going to happen. So I'm just going to sit here and sit in my convictions. Most people believe it's just a certainty, a virtual certainty, that the Bears are going Jeanty. And so Swift there's no demand. There's no demand for Swift. But some people, you never know who it is, that have Swift, might have read an article or mock draft or McShay or whatever, and they're convinced that what they have in their hand is a time bomb, and they're trying to hot potato it. And you just want to be there. You want to be the guy that reaches out and is like, hey, just want to check in. I see you have Harris and Swift.
I'm eyeing that as my starting backfield going into 2025.
Right, and call me crazy, but I'm looking for some running back upgrade, and I just think that maybe either Swift or Harris, if you're interested. And then they come back to you and say, well, I've read a bunch of athletic articles, and I'm convinced that Harris is going to Los Angeles, so he's off the table. But, Swift is yours for a blah. Because, again, in that same place where they go for their news, they read the mock draft where Jeanty goes to Chicago.
Yeah, I'll give you Jonathan Brooks. Give me Swift. I'll give you Jonathan Brooks.
By the way that Roschon gets there this year is nothing to do with who they draft. It's all about the demise of Swift.
Ah, okay.
But that's how Roschon gets there. Swift is not meant for this league, man. He's not going to be in the league but much longer. You could tell. He's not. This is not it. Like, he's getting by on athleticism. He's not putting any work in behind the scenes or in the off season. And those guys, they just leak productivity and efficiency each and every year and eventually pick up injuries. And he was relatively healthy last year, and it's going to be very difficult for a lot of these running backs to stay as healthy as they were last year. So whether it's Kyron Williams, whether it's James Cook, whether it's DeAndre Swift, even Derrick Henry, there's just so many running backs that ran pure last year that in general, this is a great year to be investing in the wide receiver position, both in the first round in rookie drafts, like you mentioned, but also in startups and in the trade market. I mean, are you trying to actively unload running backs in leagues?
No, but that's largely just because the market, like you're saying, for outside of the top, 6-7 running backs, the market is absolutely fearful that every running back is going to just get completely nuked, which that's kind of what we're talking about with Swift, but apply that to a bunch of other guys. I mean, I saw a question in the chat this is a little scary, but is Chase Brown just going, is he in 3 years, is he DeAndre Swift, Matt?
I have no idea what he is. I've been rarely this impressed in my life of a guy remaking himself and learning all the football skills that you need to impress the coaches and get the playing time, where when he came into the league, he had none of that. And that shows a level of work ethic behind the scenes that DeAndre Swift will never touch. So for that reason, I'm hopeful that he can retain, but I also don't trust the NFL front offices to appreciate a day 3 running back enough and not draft a top 10 running back because they just see it as a need. What'll happen is these NFL teams, they're not drafting Chase Brown's replacement or the big competition for touches in the backfield because of Chase Brown. They're thinking about the loss of Zach Moss. That's the thing that is, that's the reason, like the loss of Mostert is the reason why Miami goes and drafts a running back and all the Jalen Wright people are furious. It has nothing to do with Jalen Wright and Achane. It's that these teams think in terms of a 3-man unit, a running back room, and we're missing a piece in the running back room and we need to make sure we backfill it. That's how they're thinking. They're not thinking like the backfield's fine. Right, the one backfield I've argued, you mentioned it earlier, where I really can't see it because they have so many needs and they've been very savvy drafters, is Los Angeles. I do believe the Rams are not in the market for a running back. If there was a team that I could say with any certainty they're not, it would be that team. But I've been wrong before, right? The NFL has shocked me before. So that's the path. That's the path for the Chase Brown getting competition, but how the hell could a running back crowd him out? Because he has now officially, he's like, an all-purpose guy, even though he wasn't as efficient in some of these situations as you would have liked.
I think we also have to realize that, a lot of running backs are going to get competition, but what does that actually mean? Like, Chase Brown's going to get competition.
So
they
what?
are going to draft a body somewhere between round 3 and round 6. The Bengals have taken, I don't believe they've taken a running back in the top 3 rounds. I think the highest running back they've taken in the last decade has been maybe Mark Walton. That's a name from the past. Mark Walton. They took him in the early, but they're typically taking running backs around 4, 5, 6.
Mark Walton from Miami.
Yes, Mark Walton was a 4th round pick by the Bengals. Then he got arrested. There you go.
Mark Walton from Miami, right? Miami.
Yes.
And you mentioned Damian Martinez earlier.
I would love Damian Martinez in round 4, round 5 as a compliment to Chase Brown, but that's the competition. Like that.
That's what I'm talking about. If that happens, what do you care? What do you care if that guy eats 150 between the tackles carries? That just keeps Chase Brown healthy. That offense has so many snaps and so many carries, touches, targets inside the 20. You don't care if they draft Damian Martinez in round 3 or 4.
Yep. Yeah, I think the chat said since Mixon that they haven't taken a high running back. So they're going to take one probably round 4, 5, 6. And it's not going to be somebody that's threatening Chase Brown's role, but the community is going to perceive it as, here's where whoever that running back they take, Matt, how do people like that player prior to is going to be a huge factor as to how impactful that's going to be on Chase Brown. Okay, can you think of a running back that nobody's really talking about that if went there, people would go, oh, that's not a big deal. But if it's RJ Harvey who slips and people love, that's the type of player people are going to go, man, he might be better than Chase Brown. But really, a lot of that's just perception of who that name is. Is the name somebody that people are going to gravitate and say that's a great pick, or is it just going to be a random player that nobody really has conviction on and he's just in the backfield? Because they're going to take one, as are a lot. There's a lot of Chase Brown situations where a team's going to draft one. The Giants are going to draft a running back.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't mean it threatens Tyrone Tracy, though. He is what he is. His skill set is his skill set. You just hope that the player they draft isn't somebody that has a ton of hive mind love. That's where I think it's going to impact these guys more so than the actual role impact, if that makes sense.
How safe is Tyrone Tracy?
Not as safe as Chase Brown.
No.
Is that a cop-out answer?
No, that's the
because
thing.
He's not.
I don't think
his
he's
offense
that
isn't
safe.
Right
I think he was great. I think he was very good. And they had all these opportunities to stick with Devin Singletary, and they made the move relatively early for an NFL team that had brought in a free agent running back that was supposedly their answer. And no. They moved on very quickly. Who's a great locker room guy? Like Devin Singletary, motor. They love him. So
is he just Tajay Spears from last year? Which the reason that outcome didn't work is because the offense was terrible. Like the offense wasn't great, right? But do you project the Giants to be a great offense? Like it kind of feels like that could be the comparison. And that doesn't mean, I drafted a ton of Tajay Spears because I think he's a good player. But that doesn't speak to the safety of the asset talking about a year later. Tajay Spears is just an afterthought. He's a running back. He's on a roster. He's shown some stuff, but there's really no demand or there's nothing you can do with him. He's more valuable as one of your running backs as part of your stable than he ever would be to somebody else. That's what Tracy feels like to me.
I would get out of Tracy.
How do you do it, though? What do you take? If someone says they'll give you a reroll in the mid-second of this class, Superflex, would you do it? Just a reroll? No profit? You're walking away, living to see another day with the flexibility of a future pick. See? That's a realistic offer of what you would get. That's realistic of what you'd get offered today if you put him on the block, though. You're not probably getting much higher.
That's why I like to circle some tight ends and some wide receivers that are down the board, and then I'll do it. Right? I'll do it if you can make it worth my while. If you can add something, then I'll do it. Right? You got to give me something. You can't just give me a reroll. That's not going to happen. You got to give me something.
You could probably trade him for Najee Harris. That's for sure.
Well, I would do that.
No, but that I think this exercise, though, if you're trying to figure out risk analysis on situations and players, it's great to say I'd love to get out of Tyrone Tracy. But then as soon as I asked you, how do you do it? Immediately you have to start thinking, okay, if there's a moderately sound manager on the other side, there's probably somebody in another dimension or another world right now saying they're trying to buy Tyrone Tracy. There's another podcast being recorded right now where somebody is making the case for Tyrone Tracy as a buy.
Oh, yeah.
But that manager is going, how can I buy him from the guy that's scared of him for a mid-second? You know what I mean? Like, they're trying to figure out how they get the other person to accept that deal. So assuming those two people came together to make a trade, if neither side is really willing to budge at that re-roll or I'll buy at the current keep trade cut market price, a deal never gets done. And then you end up just sitting there and waiting and praying on draft night. Man, I really hope they don't draft a running back in the second round, in the third round that I really like.
I like Rashid Shaheed.
I like that.
I like Rashid Shaheed in a second.
Oh, I would do that. That's just a process trade right there. You get a second tacked on to a receiver that you know you'll be able to use. Yeah, do that all day.
But Tyrone Tracy has some juice. That's a trade you could do.
Agree.
This is what I'm talking about, right? This is what I'm talking about. You know, Darnell Mooney, guys you could use, guys with spike week potential that you could use. There's going to be competition for touches in that backfield that's better than Devin Singletary. And where is this offense going to be a year from now? Where is this offense going to be 2 years from now? How long is it going to take?
That's why I brought up the Spears comparison. You're probably looking at maybe what if it's a second round Jaxson Dart as the quarterback with a bridge quarterback coming in to start the beginning of the year. It feels like it's a lame duck coaching and GM situation, like you mentioned earlier too. It just there's a lot of red flags with Tracy if you could make that deal. I agree.
Now, what about Dart and Milroe in Superflex? How aggressively are you trying to get these guys? Because again, these receivers we're talking about are off the board, right? So in Superflex, can you see Dart going ahead of Mbuka? I guess it's possible.
See, I don't actually overthink this because I do think draft capital is going to tell us exactly what these teams think about these guys. Actually, historically, I know there's been some articles published to the contrary, but over the last 5 years that teams don't draft quarterbacks in the second round, even the third round. Like teams just don't. They either get their quarterbacks high, they draft them high in the first, or they wait. They'll take a quarterback in round 3, round 4, round 5. Those have been the 3 most popular rounds for quarterbacks to go in the last 5 years, round 3 through 5. If they go in round 3, I mean, what are they? They're just Spencer Rattler. You know what I mean? They're probably in an opportunity spot, but they're not somebody that I'm taking with a premier draft pick. So I think that's where those guys fall. If Dart gets drafted high, he's going to go high, Matt. I think if he gets drafted high, it's going to be high, like top 10, top 15. And if he goes top 15...
Why wouldn't he go for... Can you explain to me why he's not a first-round pick in the NFL?
I can't. If you take away a lot of the subjective stuff about quarterbacks that I have no business speaking to, like just watching them on film, watching their arm, watching throws they can make, like people will nitpick Jaxson Dart. But then if you just look on paper, you go, how does he not fit the same type of profile that somebody like Bo Nix did? Or
it's
Michael
a Bo Nix all over again. This is Bo Nix Redux,
but
where the guy transfers
yes.
And the fact that he washed out or the college he was recruited by, you didn't appreciate him. Like that is a big smear against him. Dart's growth and development year over year is as consistent as Najee Harris's mediocrity. He goes from 3,000 yards to 3,500 to 4,200. He goes from 8.2 to 9.4 to 10.8 yards per attempt. 10.8 yards per attempt. The completion percentage, the touchdowns going up, the interceptions going down. The only thing that's consistent is his rushing yards. Why? What? This guy screams like pick 16. And
Higher.
And you better be drafting him in Superflex.
Higher. Because the only thing that was missing with him a month ago was the hype to go in the first round. And then now that's there. So I think he ends up going in the top 15, if not higher, maybe even top 10. And if he does that, the mistake I think people made last year, I mean, no, it was just last year, but the mistake people made was that they didn't correct fast enough on the NFL's take on draft capital, right? Like, I don't care whether you think Jaxson Dart or Shedeur Sanders is a better quarterback. If they both go within 6 picks of each other in the NFL draft, if one goes at pick 5 or 6 and one of them goes at pick 12, then there's no difference. They're completely evaluations based on their landing spot, their coach, their weapons, all of those things. But I think we'll know. We'll know if he goes that high. If he doesn't, then I'm just not that interested. I mean, I play the any quarterback on a 2 deep strategy, meaning I'll roster a bunch of backup quarterbacks, but I'm not paying for them. So like Jalen Milroe, if he's a 3rd round pick, someone else will take him before me because they'll just say, oh, if he has a lot of upside if he starts, but I'm not going to probably take him. So I don't overthink this, Matt. They either go in the first or I'm not really that interested.
It's perfect. No, it's a great position to take. On Origins, the rookie-only tournament, $25,000 prize pool on FastDraft. Dart went as high as he's ever gone in the most recent draft. Most recent draft went Jeanty, Ward, Hampton, Sanders, McMillan, Caleb Johnson, TreVeyon Henderson, rising, Jaxson Dart with a 108, then Judkins, then Mbuka. If you don't think that that's efficient ADP, then you should play on Origins and capitalize and exploit it. Mm-hmm. And the code there is Podfather, and you get a $25 deposit match when you sign up on FastDraft. What do you think of that? You think that's just what we're going to start seeing in Superflex leagues, 2 quarterback leagues, formats like Origins? It's just he's first round, easy.
I think as the narrative continues to build, I mean, I mentioned Todd McShay earlier, but he was one of the first coming out of the Senior Bowl. Even during the Senior Bowl week, he basically was like, I've seen everything from Jaxson Dart that I need to see. And it has nothing to do with, I mean, people comment about how he didn't have a great Senior Bowl. Like, he was good, but he wasn't as good as Bo Nix or Michael Penix last year. Again, I didn't notice that. I didn't notice those guys stood out last year, to be honest. Like, nothing that you see there, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is just the it factor. I mean, you've been to more Senior Bowls than me, but like, the stuff that's being talked about as why he should go higher has nothing to do with what you saw at the Senior Bowl or what you're going to see at the Combine. It's these other things that seems to get quarterbacks drafted higher. The intangibles, the abilities to adapt, things like that we wouldn't even have an ability to quantify. You don't go on Player Profiler to see those things. You know what I mean?
No, there is one thing, and you see it at the Senior Bowl, and it is the one determining factor for these guys to get drafted in the first round. And it's the Jordan Love corollary. Especially from a smaller school, if they go to the Senior Bowl, I mean, Utah State's not, they're still Division I. They're just not
G5. It's a G5.
They're
it's
just
a step
not
down.
Power 5 conference. But yes. Like, okay, so goes from Utah State, goes to the Senior Bowl, and he's going yard for yard, big play for big play with Justin Herbert on these deep balls. Right? And it's an impressive Senior Bowl. I mean, it was raining down in 2020, bombs from Love and Herbert, and it was super impressive. And at the Senior Bowl, what do you never see? Because it's practice and it's non-contact. You don't see mobility from the quarterbacks. They're not there to practice quarterback runs. So you never see it, and it's not part of the evaluation. So Jalen Hurts goes to that same Senior Bowl, and he was not someone anyone was ever talking about at that 2020 Senior Bowl. It was all about Love and all about Herbert. Now, Herbert also has athleticism, as does Love, and the big arm, which makes them exciting NFL players and fantasy relevant, especially if they have great weapons. But a guy with mobility as one of his big added values, whether it be a Bo Nix or a Jalen Hurts, they're just not going to get the same kind of buzz. What gets the buzz at the Senior Bowl is the arm strength. First, and even if it's not that accurate, it doesn't matter. The oohs and the ahs, that's what people are writing about. That's what they're talking about with quarterbacks. So, I mean, I'll never forget that, man. I'll never forget that I forgot that Hurts was even there. It was crazy. He just won the Super Bowl, and he was the MVP at the Super Bowl. And I'm like, yeah, I was at the Senior Bowl.
It's actually frowned upon at the Senior Bowl if you take off and run as the quarterback. Yeah. There was a couple plays this year where Milroe couldn't find a receiver in the 11-on-11s, and he just runs it up the middle. And you're like, man, that's what people like for fantasy. But in a practice,
that's a great point. When the quarterback does run in those situations, it's like shameful.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like stationary throwing. Mm-hmm. And these are just things that, whether it's, we've seen Lamar Jackson at the Pro Bowl be the worst stationary thrower in Pro Bowl history and it not matter, right? Another MVP.
Mm-hmm.
So the value on Jaxson Dart in all formats, it's great. It's great, man. I mean, I would challenge anyone in the chat, tweet me or X me, tweet X me at fantasy_mansion. Share with me any example from Player Profiler of any player that has more consistently improved year over year than Jaxson Dart. I'd love to see it. I'll get you out of here, man. Bold prediction for this year. Make it happen.
Oh, man. Bold prediction for this year. We see a complete collapse of the entire running back system from last year. It was the healthiest year for running backs in the last 5 years. I think we may go all the way the other way around, where we see a lot more running backs get injured. We see a lot more people with their hearts broken that have decided in their leagues they're just going to roll out 5 running backs and flex 3 of them every week. And they're going to feel the pain that a lot of people felt last year when they did that with wide receivers. So I just think we see a lot of regression with running back health, which is going to create a lot more fun with this running back class coming in, because it's already a lot to digest. And then if that happens, it's going to be pure chaos going into 2026.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.